Okay, so let's get started. Thank you again so much, all of you, for coming today. Brian and I are old friends. We were just talking about the old boots, so we share an alumni. We'll talk about that in a second. But today what we wanted to do was take a deep dive with Revenue Cloud. They're not necessarily Revenue Cloud. Let's not focus too much on the SKU or the product necessarily. I mean, we will talk about it in some shape or form, but how we're really transforming, revolutionizing the concept of the Office of the CFO on platform. So more than ever, we are now able to expose a lot of key critical data to several parts of our organizations, particularly the Office of the CFO, which you traditionally kind of found sitting in the ERP. So Salesforce now kind of driving that into the front end of our tech stack, and that's really going to be what we're talking about today in a couple different pockets of information. So just by means of introduction, so of course everybody here knows Brion. He needs no introduction. He is Salesforce royalty. I'm actually feeling a little bit insignificant on this stage next to you, so thank you for sitting with me. We go way back. You and I go back to the days of Aptus, as we do with Goldoni and Knowlton there joining us today. But you have a very interesting career history, which I would love for you to tell everybody about here and just introduce yourself for those of you who don't know you, which I don't assume is many.
All right, so I'll start with the short version.
Okay.
I joined the military in 1980 as a helicopter mechanic, and I have a degree in aircraft maintenance management and never expected to be in technology. It found me. I got out of the service. I worked for a division of B.F. Goodrich Aerospace, and we configured landing gear. And there was no product configurator. There was no CPQ for years to come. So we used Lotus 123 Release 1A, and I built a configurator. And for whatever reason, that really sort of aligned with my mechanical ability. And I still today, many customers I'll sit and talk about is I use my mechanical mind to think about how to change business process, right? Is it gas, air, spark, and where do I go from there? And for me, CPQ has been that tool that allows me to help businesses transform. And now, of course, it's much bigger than just CPQ. But so over the years, I guess my first true product configurator was Trilogy.
Yep.
And then what's now wasn't Epicor then, but ultimately became Epicor. 15 years at Oracle, the GM of CPQ at Aptus.
Yep.
And now 5+ years here at Salesforce. And then cabin life after this.
There you go. With your Uptima cups on your tractor.
That's right.
There you go. Every time I talk to Brian, he's got his Uptima Yeti with him on camera, so we sent him a second one because he said it was becoming burdensome to carry it between his tractor and his desk. So now he's got an Uptima Yeti on his tractor and an Uptima Yeti when he's talking to everybody else. Very good. Well, first and foremost, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
It's wonderful. My name is Alex Bell, for those of you who don't know me. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at Uptima. By trade, I am an accountant, fortunately or unfortunately, but I do refer to myself as the recovering accountant because once your brain starts thinking that way, right, Nicole, you can't stop. Like, it just never stops. I've been at Uptima now for about 4 years, but I am absolutely a career consultant for all intents and purposes. I came to the Salesforce ecosystem happenstance, much like you, and it's interesting now we've watched the evolution of the Salesforce ecosystem where people are intentionally evolving their education and their career prospects for the Salesforce platform. It wasn't like that for us. We just sort of found our way here. And the way that I found my way here is I was working on a project which connected a very small CRM product at the time called Salesforce with Oracle on-prem. It was the worst project of my life. It was really hard, but lo and behold, 20 years later, I'm still here. And I still consider myself a revenue specialist. I still very much think in the way an accountant does. And so when I'm talking with folks like Brion, who don't share that financial background, but we share very similar opinions and point of views of how the platform is energizing focuses like roles like the CFO, we wanted to come together and talk to you about how we're now the relationship between the front end and the back end, and how we are really moving into unifying both the Office of the CRO and the CFO. So we'll just talk quickly about session overview. We're going to move into how the Office of the CFO and the CRO are truly being unified, and how we're doing that now by enabling these very robust processes in the front end, and complementing what now happens in these traditional ERPs. The subscription model, it's a really hot topic item. Every single company is trying to make a move towards that subscription commerce model, the stability in recurring revenue. And then M&A, lastly, so we'll wrap up the session with M&A. So Brion, when we talk about a key measurement that a CFO and a CRO, they genuinely care about, revenue, et cetera, but profitability is a word that I think gets lost in the mix a lot. So when we're putting things on Salesforce, what are the things that are happening on platform that are really helping us to increase profitability across the revenue flow or the selling cycle?
Yeah, I think this is a really relevant question too, because for many years, the focus has been growth. And as the economic ups and downs, the reality is, and we'll argue about this later, is the things that really matter are profitability and cash, right? And so regardless of where you are in the economic cycle, you've got to run your business. And so we think about Revenue Cloud as a tool to help businesses manage what I would refer to as profitable growth, right? And so when we think about that, what are businesses doing today through the pandemic, for obviously first, and then since, through these economic headwinds, to stay relevant, to continue to raise cash organically or inorganically. And the big things that we see, that I see, are the move to recurring revenue models, subscription management, for example, and the move to drive cost out of the revenue life cycle, right? Which we talk about omni-channel. So how do I do more customer self-service, right? And so how do I remove friction from the customer, automate processes, and streamline it in a way that allows my business to run more efficiently, reducing SG&A costs, creating perfect orders that create perfect invoices, reducing DSO, right? And so we start to think about it not just about rep productivity, and rep productivity is important, but ultimately, as Meredith actually said earlier in a session we had, the C360 is important, but every one of our Salesforce customers also cares about money, right? We're all doing this, even to generate cash, right? And so we have to have a focus on that operational excellence, and how can technology enable those types of changes that you need to make in order to stay relevant in your market.
Wonderful. Yeah. So we're going to talk now about how the Office of the CRO and the CFO are genuinely becoming unified. And Brion, you articulate this so beautifully, and this is something that we've heard you talk about in many sessions. And I think it's important to continue to review it. But we used to have, if you think about 10, 15 years ago, like our go-to-market strategies or our sales channels were much more simplified. So we're now moving into this more complex model, which is really tying these two offices together. Elaborate on that for us.
Yeah, and I think it fits into what we were talking about a moment ago, is as we move from exclusively selling one-time products to complex products, services, subscription products, support products, right, recurring, non-recurring revenue models, and we start doing that across multiple channels, there starts to be a level of complexity that our legacy systems they just can't support, right? Let's be real. If I need a product catalog and a price engine for every sales channel, and I use a different CPQ for my complex configured goods than my SaaS software, who's managing all that, right? So it comes back to that profitability. And so that's why I think what this chart shows real well is that we want to be able to support all the different go-to-market strategies that a customer deploys across all of the different channels that they intend to deploy, some of which they may not even know exist yet, right? And do that in a way that takes complexity out of it, makes it easier to serve the customer. I mean, why are you doing this? The customer wants to be able to do business with you, the buyer, at the date and time and place of their choosing. And that could be on an e-commerce site one day. It could be through a partner the next day. It could be phone sales, direct set, right? And so all of those things have to interoperate together. And if you think about the subscription life cycle, I may sell you software in a direct sales motion, but you may be working on something Friday afternoon and need 5 more units.
Right.
And I don't want to call my rep. He's out golfing, right? It's Friday. So I go on to self-service and I just amend my contract, right? And so this ability to interplay between all these different channels for all the different things that I sell that you buy from me, it just matters.
And to your point, it's also not just that a customer might be using a single channel in one transaction. You might start off in an e-commerce capacity and then get handed over to a deal desk or a rep. So there can be multiples of these channels participating in one single transaction.
That's right.
And so we're able to capture all of that process behavior, the data, the analytics on a unified platform. So now you think about when we're unifying all these go-to-market strategies, channel, customer data, from the perspective of the CRO and the CFO, we are achieving predominantly several shared goals. But overall, we've got excellence in pricing, right? So we know what price we're moving out into market. We have reduced revenue leakage, and this is very important when we take into consideration the recurring revenue model, no matter what type of business is doing that. When we're working inside of a recurring revenue model, we're typically working on a subscription model, and it is possible to provision, whether that be software licenses, or it is beverage capsules to quench machines, or it is irrigation as a service. I mean, you take whatever you want, but we need to be able to identify in real time who is using our product. How are we fulfilling that product? And by doing that, by being able to capture all of that data on platform, we mitigate a lot of revenue leakage. That is absolutely a shared goal between the CRO and the CFO, right? Revenue, this is where we might argue sometimes, but revenue is king. So we're also able to proactively address customer churn. We're auto-renewing, right? So when we're working in a high revenue, high recurring revenue situation, we depend heavily on renewals. And to Brion's point earlier, where profitability is becoming increasingly important in today's market, so we see a tremendous trend in organizations who might be consolidating. They might choose to maintain certain features of certain products or certain product sets and then divest in others. But how are we making those products that we want to keep inside of our company as profitable as possible as we can? And we need to be able to actively real-time report on that as well. And then, lastly, we need to identify new opportunities. And so when we're using things, our Customer 360, the viewpoint of the Customer 360 on a single platform, we're able to critically analyze what are our customers doing? Like, what are the behaviors? What are they are they actually using this license? Do we need to swap it out? Like, what's our opportunity on renewal? Can we uplift here? How are we measuring their usage? And so now what we have is this customer-centric data, which both the Office of the CRO and the CFO want. They just use it differently, right? It's same data, different use, but we've now unified that.
Yeah, and if I can just build on that, we've gone from VP of sales or whatever to chief revenue officer for a reason. And as we see larger and larger percent of revenue being recurring revenue, what I think about, and you'll often hear me talk about, is this A plus B minus C equals D formula. And A is your net new business, B is your add-on business, C is attrition, D is revenue. So if you're not managing the customers you sold stuff to, they're not going to buy more. So you don't get that bump. And if they're not adopting it, they're going to trip. And you can't run a recurring revenue business if every year you have to sell enough to make up for everything you lost, right? It has to grow, and so as a CRO, it's not just about landing new business. Yes, I need to have effective sales cycles, but I need to also be worried about adoption. And what are the things that go into a customer adoption? Might be a partner that can help you successfully use it.
Yes.
Right?
Good partners are always a key ingredient to adoption.
And so when you think about that, what I just described from the CRO perspective, to Alex's point, I need to think about what are my go-to-market strategies to land new business, to sell new things to those customers, and to drive customer success. But if I think about that from the CFO, what do I need to think about? How do we land new business? How do we drive customer success? And how do I prevent attrition?
Right. And how am I being profitable in my approach to those 4 areas? Yeah, very good. So now we're going to start talking a little bit more about the common relationship that's emerging as something that's becoming increasingly popular, and this is a relationship now between the front end and the back end, so these traditional ERPs. And I think one of the powerhouses of Salesforce that we're seeing is we have the ability to automate a lot of our revenue lifecycle, which drives that intelligence. Walk us through now what we're seeing in terms of the ability to automate at kind of those revenue touch points in the front office.
Yeah, and I think this is critical. It's a big part of our vision, especially, is for years we talked about CPQ and billing. In a prior life, we talked about quote to cash. And we talk about quote to cash here too. But what I'm seeing is not all revenue fits into the CPQ bucket or the quote to cash bucket. Yep. If I'm selling something on an e-commerce site, do I start with a quote, right? Or lead to cash? Did I start with a lead? So we need to think about revenue lifecycle management. What are all of the things we need to do from product to cash to manage that productive, profitable revenue growth? Yep. And it starts with understanding how best to commercialize your products, right? Engineering built products so that they could be built and shipped, whatever. But if you try to sell using the engineering data, you might struggle. So we want to start by thinking about how to commercialize our product catalog. What is the attribution required to make it easier for our sellers or buyers to find the right thing to meet their need? Yep. How do we price it in ways that are competitive? What are proper discount schedules? Are we doing subscription? Are we doing usage? What are the rate tables? There's so much that goes into that decision that makes us successful in the marketplace. But once we've done that, we now need to be able to serve that sort of master data up into ways that allow us to manage the journey from product to cash for our buyers and sellers. And for us, most recently, we've introduced contracts to that. Yes. Right? So you've got, a quote or a cart, maybe an opportunity becomes an order. We're going to orchestrate that order, fulfill the order. We're going to invoice it, bill it, recognize revenue, collect cash. But if we're really going to do this right, and we're really going to drive friction out of the process and make sure our sellers and buyers are following the guidelines that we've set forth, we need to integrate a layer of contract into that, right? So there's an NDA in place. Yep. Do we know that there's an NDA in place? Are we talking about things we shouldn't talk about because we don't have an NDA in place? Is there an MSA in place? When I create a quote, are my quotes being created automatically based on the terms and conditions defined in the MSA? When somebody calls support, are they meeting the SLA agreements that were memorialized in the contract? And right, so we start to think about how not just the Office of the CFO and the CRO, but now also the CLO. So where does legal fit in? And by the way, how often do lawyers interact with your customers and negotiate contracts? They're not. Sales are.
Right.
So we need to think about contracts from the lens of how are buyers and sellers interacting with that legal entity.
Yeah.
Certainly we need lawyers in the background, just like we need engineers in the background, but we need to think about how to commercialize this activity and do it in a way, again, that drives friction out, drives up customer experience, improves customer experience and adoption.
You know what the issue is with knowing this stuff is that in my regular life now, when I'm out there in the world, being a customer, buying things, and I see breakdowns in my experience, I know where their points of failure are. Like, I know what's happening. And so for those of you who were here on Monday, this is going to be a repeat for you, but I'm going to tell you a little story about how knowing this is just, it becomes kind of hilarious. So I live in the South. Everybody in the South has screened-in porches. You just do it, otherwise you're going to get eaten alive by mosquitoes and you can't enjoy your outdoor space. So I decided to put this different system in my screened-in porch. And I started working with the company. You know, they showed up, they took the measurements. My sales rep's name was Greg, and it was great. You know, we sat down, we went through all the itemized list of what I was buying, what it was going to look like, the colors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I said, hey, Greg, like, what's my time to install now? And he said, oh, we're about 8 weeks out. Okay, so fine. Greg goes away, I pay my deposit, and the 8 weeks rolls by, and I'm like, hey, Greg, where's my stuff? And he said, well, we're delayed a couple of weeks. No, we'll probably be closer to 10. So 12 weeks later, an install crew shows up, and they start working on my install. And I ordered kind of 2 double doors. Anyway, the way that they fit into where they were supposed to go, and my install crew was awesome, to be quite honest. But they were just like, look, this isn't going to look right. There's a bit of a miss here, da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, well, how is this a miss? I mean, I just talked about this, like, quite simply with your sales rep and whatever. And, you know, we chatted about that for a minute and what could be done. And one of the installers, he was like, well, who sold this to you? Who's your sales rep? And I was like, Greg. And he just shakes his head, turns around and walks away and goes, Greg. So across this entire cycle, like, I'm watching at each point where, you know, this particular organization, like, Greg, like, come on, you know, how are we? And so at the end of the day, they ended up giving me a $300 credit, which in the grand scheme of things wasn't very much on top of it. They're like, well, we're really sorry for your trouble.
But you still have mosquitoes on your porch.
No, I have no mosquitoes in my porch. I have no mosquitoes, no pollen, and no rain.
Problem solved.
I'm good to go. So, you know, on the outside of it, really good. But it's kind of like being, you know, a recovering accountant. Once you know this stuff, you see it. You see where the breakdown is happening in your real life. And it's genuinely felt by the customer, right? And I know this being a customer, but anyway, I just wanted to share the story of Greg. So my husband and I now fondly refer to each other as Greg. And whenever delivery gets mad at me about something, I'm like, Greg. Right. So put it all together, right? And we're very results focused. I think of an important thing when you are going through a transformation as it relates, you know, to this full revenue operation cycle, unifying these offices, focused on excellence in customer experience, buying experience. What we're seeing now is, on the results side of things, it's really being powered out of Unity, and now we have this, like, tremendous opportunity for the involvement of AI. So AI has been a really hot ticket item, but we've talked about how we're doing that already with some forecasting and dashboarding. Now the concepts around generative AI is just putting that on horsepower. So on the service side of things, we actually have a really great demo here. It, like, works. We're watching generative AI now work on platform, where we've created an entitlement. So you talk about contracts on platform now. We've created an entitlement. No, we have to obligate to that entitlement. We've got a case that comes in, and now, hey, using generative AI, here's the recommendations for, you know, your knowledge base. Here's how to resolve that. But on the results side of things, what we really want to drive towards is a good harmonious relationship now between all of these front-end processes and our ERP. We're going to talk more about that, but what we want to really avoid is a lot of manual reworking through our CRM and our ERP, eliminating a lot of those pivots. For me, when I'm working with my customers, my apologies, I forgot that that was on me. When I'm working with my customers, what I see as a good result, a good outcome is, are you getting the data you need? Can you sell quickly? Are your users reasonably satisfied with the system? You can't make everybody happy. I say if you get to 80% there, you're probably doing all right. And are you able to real time forecast, identify your weak points, and overall, is your business becoming more profitable? So with that said, this is where Brian and I disagree, and I understand where he's coming from, especially in today's market. Like, cash is very important these days, but overall, like when
She almost said it too, cash is king.
When we move out of this current market trend, revenue is always king. You can solve a lot of problems when you just simply have more revenue. It's true. A lot of problems melt away. But margin is your measurement of health, and then the devil's in the detail in the disclosures and your financial statements, and this is where we get into the concepts of cash, because we look at what our cash line item is on our balance sheet, our assets. But to that point, sales and finance are now equally accountable to the entire revenue life cycle. It's no longer just like, hey, accounting, create me a general ledger and now make reports. That's simply not how it works. And what we're finding is that we're having sales operations teams, sales teams, gen lead teams. They have to become more comfortable with some of these accounting concepts in the front end. So contracts, ASC 606. This is a very popular thing to talk about because it dictates how we set up our contracts in the front end. It dictates how we're going to recognize revenue in the back end in its system of record. So unifying these offices has been something that's become very popular now as everyone is moving towards the subscription model. We've got customers, who have been traditionally big agricultural customers. They provide pivots to water fields. Now they're rebranding as a software company. We now provide the software so you can operate those systems remotely. But the trend in moving towards recurring revenue, and I'm going to hand back over to you to talk about this, but there are significant trends, there's benefits, there's some issues with this. Talk us through that.
Yeah, I think that the key is, and I say this to customers all the time, I've probably said it 3 times this week already in SIC meetings, is a lot of customers, as they move to recurring revenue, think they have a CPQ problem. And what I make sure they understand is they have a product to cash problem. Because how you set up one-time charge products, how you sell, how you recognize revenue, how you invoice one-time charge products is very different than how you set up products for termed subscription, evergreen subscription, usage-based products, how you sell them, how you recognize revenue for them, how you bill them, right? You may bill in advance, recognize revenue in arrears, right? There's so many things going on in that model. There is no one CPQ solution that solves it all. I need a billing solution. I need proration. I need to rethink how I'm going to recognize revenue. And the problem is that the ERP systems were not designed for this. They were designed, A, to manage the general ledger, B, to manage inventory, and if you're a factory, to build stuff. And those are all great things, and we need ERP systems to do what they do. But they don't have the flexibility, the agility to allow a business to change their go-to-market strategies and then to be able to account for the results of those changes. And so you're forced with starting to customize all these different parts of your ERP system to perform unnatural acts, or use a front office system. And by the way, when we're built, invoice is not customer facing, right? So we think of an invoice as a back office capability, but the truth is you send them to your customer.
You do.
They're customer facing. And so why don't they live in your front office? They didn't need to before, but as we start to realize that we're going to bill customers on a monthly basis for the consumption, for what they consumed last month, and as their consumption hits certain volumes, we're going to amend their contract and change their price points, then I need to manage proration, and I need to co-terminate contracts,
Yep.
and I make changes in the customer life cycle that affect how I'm going to forecast cash, how I'm going to recognize revenue, how I'm going to collect cash, right? And you just can't do all that in any legacy ERP system. So what we see is we bring that to the front office, we surround it around our customer, and we ensure that everybody, and it goes back to this Office of CFO, CRO. Why isn't the CFO in Salesforce? If all the information the Office of Finance needs is in Salesforce to help them understand what product changes should they make, what resource allocation should they change, right? What pricing. At the end of the day, finance owns the product catalog, the pricing, the discounting, the approvals, right? And if all of that's being done in the front office,
Why shouldn't they be there?
why shouldn't they be in there?
Should be.
And so that's our vision with Revenue Cloud, is that ultimately we can provide that intelligent dashboard, revenue lifecycle management intelligence to the CRO, CFO, so that they can understand how their business is performing. And in fact, we talked about this earlier today, this notion that it could be close to the end of the quarter and I may be behind on bookings, but ahead on cash collection. What if I could dynamically change the approvals for terms, right? I don't have a collection problem right now. I have a booking problem.
Right.
Can I loosen my approvals on payment terms to increase booking and not affect my cash flow?
Right.
Or vice versa. And so we start to think about, if all of this information is in one place surrounding our C360 and empowered by data and AI, what could I do with that? What's the actionable intelligence that I could give the CFO or the CRO that would allow them to make game day decisions to ensure that they come into all of their metrics at quarter close?
Yep. And this is where we talk about, now we have our CRM and our ERP working in harmony. And it's not this concept of one competing with the other. Now we're standing them up to the best of their abilities, because you said it best, right? We were forcing the ERP into these unnatural acts. And I will tell you that we go into organizations all the time where they are still trying to force the ERP into those unnatural acts, and then we bring some of those concepts now, or applications, to the front office, and so much of that pain is relieved. One of the key areas that we see that pain and that unnatural act is change. So ERPs don't like change. They were really designed for your legacy manufacturer who built a tractor. You bought it, they built it, and then they shipped it to you, or you came and picked it up. That was really what the ERP was for, plus your general ledger, so your system of record for reconciliation, reporting, and fulfillment. But with the increased adoption of this recurring revenue model, you try and change something inside of the ERP. You want to change an invoice, you want to change an order, you want to change those things. You basically have to scrap it and start again, which I'm sure you can imagine creates a ton of time waste and also a ton of cost waste in terms of how those systems are trying to be customized to do something they're just not designed to do. I'm not designed to deadlift 400 pounds. I'm simply not designed to do it. Why would we ever try and force me to do it? And that's kind of similar to what a lot of organizations have asked the ERP to do, simply because they haven't had much of a choice. Now they do. So when we have two masters now, they no longer have to compete with each other. You've got a true sales master and a true financial master. Now they're complementing each other and they're working together harmoniously. So the data model is better. We have, user experience, absolutely. We also see things like data capture, revenue capture, profitability capture. All of that becomes more real-time accessible, because remember, time is of the essence whenever we're working in any type of revenue model. There's nothing that kills deals faster or kills a go-to-market strategy than the lapse of time. And so when we think about how now the front end is taking on some of these things that used to exist in the back end, and these financial concepts need to be readily accepted by several people across the enterprise, people like me who are ex-accountants, or even Nicole who has joined us here today, she's one of our sales engineers, she's a CPA. This is becoming more and more common that we see people with this deep financial acumen coming into the front end. So it's organic. We're seeing this happen organically. All right.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so we want to wrap up with conversation about M&A, and this has definitely been a hot ticket item for me and several of the accounts that I'm working in. But Brian, I just want to ask you to kind of kick us off in terms of there's two predominant M&A options. You can either go into like full acquisition mode, or you can acquire with the intent to flip. So when you think about it that way, how is Salesforce empowering, or maybe not empowering, maybe enabling with speed and agility these M&A activities, whether it be for complete acquisition, flip, partial flip, whatever it might be?
Yeah, and I don't know that it matters. I think the key is the PE firms are looking for companies, sort of that diamond in the rough, right? There's a company out there that's doing something really interesting, but maybe they're not doing everything they could as well as they could, and a little bit of cash infusion can help with that. But cash doesn't solve the problem in and of itself. We want to improve EBITDA, whether it's, to flip or not. We need to think about everything we've just talked about today.
Yes.
And so what I see working with PE firms now is they're doing a great job of identifying these potential acquisition targets or investment targets for all the reasons we just described. And what they want to do then is be able to come in and improve those business processes, eliminate waste, right? Remove friction, A plus B minus C equals D, right? Ultimately improve EBITDA. And they're going to do that by automating process flows and finding those places of waste that they can reduce cost, improve margin, et cetera. And by the way, the difference, if it's just Alex and Brian Co., we're going to do that one time. As a PE firm, they're going to do that over and over and over and over and over again. And so they need a process that allows them to rinse, wash, repeat. I find my next acquisition, I'm going to take the same team and go do the same thing. And so the way we think about it is, how can we help them solve that problem in a repetitive way?
And what Salesforce also does well in the M&A strategy space is, because Salesforce can be multi-org, you can partition off parts of an entity that you really want to divest in, right? So when you're onboarding an organization, if you know intentionally that the acquiring entity wants to divest in a piece of that entity, it can partition it off in its own org and keep like products or the rest of its entity that it wants to make more profitable. See, I'm using your words now, make more profitable, in an org where they measure that. So Salesforce has a lot of flexibility in the M&A approach as well, because of its ability to be multi-org, where you can have a lot of these different products and a lot of these different business units sitting on their own, ready to either remain there and will continue to profitize those, or we will make our interest.
Now you're making up your own words.
I know, I did it for you. My best made-up word to date is bikeling. It combines cycling and bicycle. You like that one? Okay. So it's efficient. So now what we're able to do is quickly offboard or divest in things if we need to. I know, here's the thing. So Salesforce, it can't boil the ocean, right? We have to think of Salesforce as our central repository, our system of record for these things that we've talked to you about today. And most certainly, it doesn't boil the ocean. It doesn't answer to every single use case. But what is so cool about the Salesforce ecosystem is that we have partners like us, where we're making this investment in Elevate, Uptima Elevate. If you haven't seen anything to do with Elevate yet, please do that downstairs. But we're bringing in these ISV partners that do bolt on to Salesforce to genuinely complete that revenue operation flow on platform, so you have that keeper of centralized data. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for your time. We have left 2 QR codes here for you. So this session was really born out of inside of the Office of the CFO, like really clever that the naming convention was same, right? We tried not to get too fancy. But myself, Sean Philbin, one of our principal consultants, we authored a 7-part series, as well as Lou Simon. I should give him credit on the AI piece of it, but we authored a 7-part series on this, so please do go and read those. It elaborates a lot on what we talked about today. And then Meredith Schmidt, who's Brion's boss at Salesforce, she recently published an article on what is RevOps. So these 2 artifacts that you can take away with you are genuinely very helpful, because we spent more time. We only have 45 minutes with you here today, but we did spend quite a bit of time putting together those articles for you. So good takeaways. All right, well, thank you, everybody. This has been an absolute pleasure to sit with you today. I hope that you found this useful. Brion and I will be around for about the next 15 minutes before we head into our next session. If you want to have a conversation, we're available. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.